Hey there, amazing viewers. Before we dive into today's powerful story, don't forget to comment where you're watching from today. We love hearing from every corner of the world. In the heart of downtown Los Angeles, where dreams are served alongside daily specials, a story unfolded that would remind us all about the true meaning of dignity and respect. It was an ordinary Tuesday evening at Giuseppe's, one of those cozy Italian restaurants where red checkered tablecloths meet crystal wine glasses and where the aroma of freshly baked garlic bread dances through the air. But this evening would prove to be anything but ordinary. The restaurant buzzed with the usual dinner crowd, business executives in tailored suits, couples on first dates, and families celebrating special occasions. Among them sat Benjamin Mitchell, a 16-year-old with Down syndrome, his bright eyes taking in every detail of the elegant establishment. His mother, Olivia Mitchell, had saved for months to treat her son to a special birthday dinner at what he called the fancy pasta place. Benjamin had always watched the restaurant from across the street on their weekly trips to the library, his face pressed against the window, mesmerized by the warm glow within. The maître d' had seated them at a quiet corner table, away from the main dining area. Benjamin didn't mind. He was too excited about being in the restaurant he'd dreamed of visiting for so long. His mother watched him with quiet pride as he carefully straightened his tie, the one he'd insisted on wearing because fancy restaurants need fancy clothes, as he'd explained that morning. What nobody in the restaurant knew was that in the kitchen, behind the swinging doors, one of Hollywood's most legendary actors was preparing to step in, not for a scene, but for something far more meaningful. Sylvester Stallone had been in the back, discussing a potential investment in the restaurant with its owner, when fate decided to write an unexpected script. William Turner, a waiter who had been with Giuseppe's for less than a month, approached the Mitchells' table. His pressed white shirt and black bow tie couldn't mask the disdain that flickered across his face as he noticed Benjamin's distinctive features. The teenage boy's excitement was palpable as he attempted to read the menu, sounding out the Italian words with determined concentration. "Welcome to Giuseppe's," Turner said, his tone carrying an edge that made Olivia Mitchell's heart sink. She'd heard that tone before, had seen that look too many times, but Benjamin, absorbed in the menu, didn't notice. He was too busy practicing the words he'd rehearsed all week. "Spaghetti carbonara." "I want this one, Mom," Benjamin announced, proudly, pointing to the item he'd just pronounced. His voice, naturally louder than most, carried across the nearby tables. A few heads turned, some with kind smiles, others with barely concealed discomfort. Turner's lip curled slightly. "Perhaps," he said, directing his words solely to Olivia, "you'd be more comfortable ordering takeout." The suggestion hung in the air like a toxic cloud, its true meaning unmistakable. Benjamin's smile faltered for the first time that evening. He might not have understood the waiter's words, but he felt their weight. His mother's hand tightened around her water glass, knuckles white with restraint. What happened next would become a story shared thousands of times across social media, a moment that would remind people that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear kitchen aprons and have fought their battles not just on the silver screen, but in real life too. The kitchen doors swung open and heavy footsteps approached their table. The waiter turned, expecting to see one of the busboys. Instead, he found himself face to face with Sylvester Stallone, his imposing presence commanding immediate attention. The actor had overheard everything from the kitchen, where he'd been sampling dishes with the owner. But more than that, he'd seen something of himself in Benjamin's determined attempt to read the menu, something that struck a deeply personal chord. The restaurant fell silent. Phones emerged from pockets, but no one dared to take photos. The tension in the air was too real for social media moments. This wasn't about celebrity sightings. This was about something far more fundamental, human dignity. Yet this was just the beginning of an evening that would remind everyone present that sometimes the most powerful scenes in life aren't scripted, and the most important battles aren't fought in the ring, but in the everyday moments where human decency hangs in the balance. The true test of character isn't in how we treat those who can benefit us, but in how we treat those who simply need us to see them as equals. Nobody in Giuseppe's that evening could have predicted how this scene would unfold, or how a simple dinner would transform into a moment that would touch millions of hearts across the world. But then again, the most meaningful moments in life often come unannounced, teaching us lessons we didn't know we needed to learn. As the tension mounted in the quiet restaurant, with all eyes fixed on the unexpected confrontation about to unfold, one truth became crystal clear. This evening would change not just Benjamin's life, but the lives of everyone present. Sometimes it takes just one person standing up for what's right to remind us all of our shared humanity. The air grew thick with anticipation as Stallone's presence commanded the room. The waiter's smugness began to falter like a candle flame in a sudden draft. But what would happen next would prove that true strength isn't measured by muscle or might, but by the capacity to stand up for those who need it most. Benjamin looked up from his menu, his eyes wide with wonder as he recognized the man standing beside their table. His mother held her breath, caught between hope and anxiety, as years of protecting her son from moments like these had taught her to expect the worst while praying for the best. The story that was about to unfold would remind everyone that in life, as in movies, the most powerful moments often come when someone unexpected steps up to fight for what's right. But unlike the silver screen, this drama would have real consequences, touching real lives and changing real hearts. The evening. Air grew still, the usual restaurant buzz fading to a whisper as all eyes turned to watch what would happen next. In that moment, Giuseppe's wasn't just a restaurant. It was about to become the stage for a lesson in humanity that none of its patrons would ever forget. What happened next would not only change the course of the evening, but would spark a conversation about dignity, respect, and the power of standing up for others that would reach far beyond the walls of this Los Angeles restaurant. Because sometimes the most important stories aren't about famous people doing extraordinary things. They're about ordinary moments where extraordinary kindness changes everything. The scene was set, the players were in place, and in the next few moments, everyone present would learn that true heroes don't just exist in movies. Sometimes they're sitting right next to us, wearing a birthday tie and struggling to pronounce carbonara with unshakable determination. As Benjamin sat there, unaware of the significance of the moment unfolding around him, his simple desire to enjoy a special birthday dinner was about to become something much more significant, a reminder to the world that every person deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of their differences. Stay tuned as we reveal what happened next in this incredible true story that shows us how one moment of standing up for what's right can create ripples of change that touch countless lives. Remember, keep watching and don't forget to let us know where you're viewing from in the comments below. The interior of Giuseppe's was a carefully orchestrated symphony of old-world charm and modern elegance. Crystal chandeliers cast warm pools of light across the burgundy walls, while black and white photographs of Italian landscapes transported diners to the winding streets of Rome and the canals of Venice. The restaurant had been a Los Angeles landmark for 3 generations, its reputation built not just on its exceptional cuisine, but on the countless memories created within its walls. That evening, the usual sounds of Giuseppe's created a familiar melody The gentle clink of fine china, the soft murmur of conversations, and the occasional burst of laughter from happy diners. At a nearby table, James Anderson, a regular patron, was celebrating his anniversary with his wife, Emma Anderson. They had been coming to Giuseppe's for 20 years, marking their special occasions in this very room. Tonight, they would witness something unforgettable. Sylvester Stallone stood at Benjamin's table, his presence both commanding and compassionate. Few people knew that Stallone himself had faced speech challenges early in life, having been born with a partially paralyzed face that affected his speech. He'd been bullied, mocked, and told he'd never make it in Hollywood. Perhaps that's why. Benjamin's determination to pronounce the Italian menu items struck such a profound chord with him. The actor's eyes swept across the restaurant, taking in the scene before him. At the bar, Michael Phillips, a businessman who had been absorbed in his laptop, now sat transfixed. Near the window, Sophie Clark, a young artist who had been sketching on her napkin, set down her pen. Even the kitchen staff, led by head chef Lucas Green, peered through the service window, sensing that something extraordinary was about to unfold. Benjamin, still beaming with excitement, clutched his menu like a precious treasure. His birthday tie, slightly crooked now, had been a gift from his older sister, Isabella Mitchell, who had helped him practice his restaurant manners all week. The tie was adorned with tiny stars, a perfect choice for what was becoming a stellar evening, though not in the way anyone had expected. Olivia Mitchell's hand rested protectively on her son's shoulder, her wedding ring catching the light. Her husband, Henry Mitchell, had passed away 3 years ago, but his presence lived on in Benjamin's kind heart and infectious laugh. She had promised herself that she would give Benjamin the same opportunities any other teenager would have, even if it meant working double shifts at the hospital where she served as a nurse. William Turner shifted uncomfortably, his earlier confidence evaporating under Stallone's steady gaze. The waiter's pristine uniform and perfectly polished shoes spoke of someone who placed great importance on appearances. His notebook trembled slightly in his hand as he realized that every person in the restaurant was now watching this unexpected scene unfold. The atmosphere in Giuseppe's had transformed. The usual dining ambiance was replaced by an electric tension that made even the candles seem to flicker with anticipation. At the entrance, Maître d'Alexander Roberts stood frozen, his reservation book forgotten in his hands. The hostess, Charlotte Young, had stopped mid-stride while leading a couple to their table. Through the large front windows, the lights of Los Angeles twinkled like stars fallen to earth. Rush-hour traffic moved along the boulevard outside, unaware of the drama unfolding within. The sun had just set, painting the sky in shades of purple and orange that seemed to echo the restaurant's rich interior tones. The aroma of fresh herbs and garlic from the kitchen mingled with the scent of fine wines and freshly baked bread. In the background, soft Italian music played. Dean Martin's That's Amore had just faded out, leaving a poignant silence that amplified the weight of the moment. Benjamin's menu lay open to the pasta section, his finger still pointing to the carbonara he'd worked so hard to pronounce. The leather-bound menu, embossed with Giuseppe's gold logo, had been picked specifically because it was, in Benjamin's words, extra fancy. Little did he know that this menu would become part of a story that would touch hearts across the world. The restaurant's veteran server, William Hall, watched from the sidelines with growing concern. In his 30 years at Giuseppe's, he had never seen anything quite like this. He remembered when Benjamin and his mother had first started appearing across the street, the boy's face pressed against the library window, looking at the restaurant. With such longing, Hall had often wondered when they would finally come in. Near the kitchen, sous chef Noah Turner was preparing a special birthday dessert, unaware of the situation unfolding in the dining room. The chocolate soufflé would have to wait as events far more important than perfect timing took precedence. The restaurant's owner, Giuseppe himself, birth name James Carter, stood in the shadows of the kitchen doorway. his father, had opened this restaurant in 1955, building it on the principles of hospitality and respect for all who crossed its threshold. Now, decades later, those very principles were being put to the test in a way no one could have anticipated. The white tablecloth on Benjamin's table bore a small water stain from his earlier excitement with the bread basket. His mother had started to apologize, but the busboy, Liam Wright, had simply smiled and said, "Special occasions deserve a little mess." That small act of kindness now stood in stark contrast to William Turner's behavior. Outside, the valet parking attendant, Lucas Scott, had just handed keys to a departing couple when he noticed the unusual stillness through the restaurant's windows. Regular customers, Charles and Amelia Baker, paused at the entrance, sensing the tension as they arrived for their standing Thursday night reservation. The wall clock above the bar showed 7:45 p.m., prime dinner service hour. Every table was full, every server usually in constant motion, but now all movement had ceased. It was as if someone had pressed pause on the entire restaurant, leaving only the soft sound of Benjamin humming happily to himself, oblivious to the dramatic scene he was part of. In the corner, a baby grand piano sat silent. The regular pianist, Daniel Nelson, was due to start his evening performance in 15 minutes. He stood by his instrument, sheet music forgotten in his hands, watching the scene unfold like everyone else. The lighting in Giuseppe's had been carefully designed to create intimate spaces within the larger dining room. Tonight, it seemed to create a spotlight effect on Benjamin's table, where Stallone stood like a guardian angel in a chef's apron, his presence both protective and formidable. William Turner's starched collar suddenly felt too tight as he stood, trapped between his previous actions and their impending consequences. His carefully maintained appearance, from his perfectly combed hair to his spotless shoes, seemed to emphasize rather than disguise his inner flaws. The moments that followed would transform Giuseppe's from just another high-end Los Angeles restaurant into a symbol of something far more meaningful. The story would be shared countless times, but those who were there would say that no retelling could capture the pure electric tension of that moment. Benjamin's birthday celebration was about to become much more than a simple dinner. It would turn into a lesson about dignity, respect, and the power of standing up for what's right. The stage was set, the actors were in place, and the next few moments would prove that sometimes the most powerful scenes in life aren't scripted at all. The weight of accumulated silence pressed against the ornate walls of Giuseppe's as everyone waited to see what would happen next. In that crystallized moment, the restaurant had become more than a place to eat. It had become the setting for a story about human dignity that would resonate far beyond its elegant confines. The simplicity of a boy's birthday wish to eat at. His dream restaurant was about to collide with the complexity of human prejudice and the unexpected intervention of someone who understood better than most the sting of being judged by appearances. What happened next would remind everyone present that true class has nothing to do with how well you can pronounce Italian words, and everything to do with how you treat others. William Turner cleared his throat, attempting to regain his composure, under Stallone's unwavering gaze. "Mr. Stallone," he began, his voice carrying a forced politeness that did nothing to mask his previous behavior, "I was simply suggesting to these customers that they might be more comfortable in a different establishment." The word customers hung in the air like a slur, making several diners shift uncomfortably in their seats. At a nearby table, Emma Anderson set down her wineglass with such force that her husband, James Anderson, placed a gentle hand over hers to steady it. Benjamin, still focused on his menu, sounded out another item, fettuccine Alfredo. His voice, filled with pure joy at mastering the pronunciation, cut through the tension like a ray of sunshine through storm clouds. His mother, Olivia Mitchell, squeezed his shoulder gently, fighting back tears that threatened to fall. More comfortable? Stallone repeated, his voice low and controlled. The actor's years of playing tough guy roles paled in comparison to the authentic strength he now projected. Tell me, Mr. Turner, what exactly makes you think you can decide who should be comfortable in this restaurant? Turner's professional facade cracked slightly. Sir, you have to understand. This is a high-end establishment. We have standards to maintain. He gestured vaguely toward Benjamin, who was now happily showing Stallone his birthday tie. Our regular clientele expects a certain atmosphere. From the kitchen doorway, Chef Lucas Green muttered something in Italian that made Giuseppe, James, Carter nod grimly. The restaurant owner's face had darkened with each word from Turner's mouth, his family's 3 generations of hospitality being tarnished by one waiter's prejudice. Standards? Stallone's voice carried the weight of personal experience. Let me tell you about standards. When I was starting out, people like you told me I didn't belong. Said my face was too crooked, my speech wasn't right, that I should find somewhere more comfortable. He emphasized the last word with quiet intensity. Benjamin looked up from his menu, finally sensing the tension around him. Mom? He questioned, his voice carrying a note of uncertainty that made several diners discreetly wipe their eyes. Turner pressed on, seemingly unable to read the room. Mr. Stallone, surely you understand the importance of maintaining a certain ambience. Other diners what? The challenge came not from Stallone, but from Michael Phillips at the bar, who had closed his laptop and turned to face the scene. Please, enlighten us about what other diners think. Charlotte Young, the hostess, had moved closer to Benjamin's table, her reservation book clutched to her chest like a shield. Her face showed the internal struggle of someone watching workplace discrimination unfold in real time. I just mean, Turner continued, his voice growing defensive, that some people aren't equipped to appreciate fine dining. It's nothing personal. It's just reality. He straightened his bow tie, as if the gesture could add weight to his words. Olivia Mitchell stood slowly, her nurse's uniform still visible under her dressy jacket. She'd come straight from her shift to make Benjamin's birthday dinner special. My son has been dreaming of eating here for 2 years, she said, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. He's practiced his manners, learned the menu, wore his special tie. Who are you to say he can't appreciate this experience? Benjamin reached for his mother's hand, his face showing concern for her distress rather than for himself. This simple gesture of empathy made Turner's prejudice appear even more grotesque in contrast. Ma'am, Turner said, his tone dripping with a condescension. Perhaps you don't understand the sophistication required. Sophistication, Stallone interrupted. Let's talk about sophistication. This young man spent 2 years preparing for this dinner. He learned Italian words, picked out special clothes, and showed more excitement about fine dining than most people who walk through these doors. That's sophistication. From his piano bench, Daniel Nelson began quietly playing Happy Birthday, the melody serving as a poignant reminder of what this evening was supposed to be about. The music seemed to underscore the absurdity of Turner's prejudice. Buddies, Turner gestured helplessly, his bigotry struggling to find socially acceptable words. He's what? Stallone stepped closer, his voice dropping to that familiar, intense whisper that had commanded attention in countless films. Different, let me tell you something about Different. Different built this country. Different wrote our greatest songs, painted our greatest paintings, and yes, Different made some of our greatest movies. Benjamin, picking up on the music, began softly humming along with Happy Birthday, creating a surreal soundtrack to the confrontation. His innocent participation made Turner's behavior seem even more shallow and cruel. I've served celebrities, business leaders, politicians, Turner protested, his voice rising slightly. I know how to maintain standards. Standards, Stallone gestured around the restaurant. Look around you. Every person in this room is watching you destroy their dining experience, not because of this young man's presence, but because of your prejudice. You're the one disrupting the atmosphere. Alexander Roberts, the maître d', had moved closer, his face a mask of professional concern. Mr. Turner, perhaps you should take a break. No, Turner interrupted, his composure cracking further. I've worked in fine dining for 15 years. I know what's best for this establishment. These people, Stallone cut in, are our guests. And right now, you're the only one here who's failing to meet the standards of hospitality. Benjamin, still holding his menu, looked at Turner with genuine curiosity rather than anger. Do you know how to say carbonara too? He asked innocently, completely missing the tension, but somehow cutting straight to the heart of human connection. The question hung in the air, its simple sincerity making several diners turn away to hide their emotional reactions. Even the kitchen staff, still watching through the service window, could be seen wiping their eyes. Turner's face flushed red. This is ridiculous. You can't possibly suggest that someone who can't even what? Stallone's voice had dropped to that dangerous quiet that movie audiences had learned to recognize as the calm before the storm. Can't even treat others with basic human dignity? Can't even see past their own prejudice? Can't even understand that true class has nothing to do with how you speak and everything to do with how you treat others? The restaurant had grown so quiet that the soft sound of Benjamin turning his menu page seemed to echo. He was still completely absorbed in the Italian words, his finger tracing under each item as he sounded them out, providing an innocent counterpoint to the tense confrontation. I'm simply trying to maintain the standards this restaurant is known for, Turner insisted, his voice now carrying a note of desperation. Our reputation, Giuseppe interrupted, stepping forward from the kitchen doorway, was built on welcoming everyone who appreciates good food and good company. My father opened this restaurant in 1955, and he served anyone who walked through that door with respect. That's our standard. The weight of history seemed to press down on the scene. 3 generations of hospitality tradition stood in stark contrast to Turner's shallow prejudice. The waiter's starched collar seemed to wilt under the collective disapproval of everyone present. Benjamin, still oblivious to the drama centered around him, had moved on to the dessert section of the menu. Tiramisu, he sounded out carefully, then looked up at Stallone with a bright smile. Did I say it right? This innocent question, asked in the midst of such tension, would become one of the most memorable moments in the countless retellings of this story. It demonstrated exactly what Turner had failed to understand, that true appreciation for fine dining or anything else comes from the heart, not from any external measure of sophistication. The confrontation had reached its crucial moment. Turner stood isolated in his prejudice, while around him a restaurant full of people had united in support of a boy who simply wanted to celebrate his birthday in his dream restaurant. What happened next would not only define the evening, but would become a viral symbol of standing up against discrimination in all its forms. The tension in Giuseppe's had reached a fever pitch. William Turner stood his ground, but his previously smug demeanor had begun to crack like old paint, revealing the insecurity beneath. Around the restaurant, phones remained lowered. This wasn't a moment for social media, it was a moment for social conscience. Perhaps, Turner said, attempting to regain control of the situation, we could arrange a private room. His suggestion carried a patronizing tone that made several diners wince. That way, everyone could be accommodated. At the bar, Michael Phillips closed his laptop with an audible snap. Accommodated? He repeated, his voice carrying across the restaurant. I've been coming here every Thursday for 5 years, and the only thing making me uncomfortable right now is your attitude." Benjamin, still engrossed in his menu, had moved on to practicing the wine list words, even though his mother had already told him he'd be having Sprite. "Sangiovese," he pronounced carefully, earning a warm smile from Sophia Clark, the young artist seated nearby who had been capturing the scene in quick sketches on her napkin. Stallone's expression hardened. "You know what I see when I look at this young man?" he asked, his voice carrying the weight of personal experience. "I see someone who worked harder to be here than you ever have. While you were learning to look down your nose at people, he was learning to overcome challenges you couldn't imagine." Turner shifted uncomfortably, his polished shoes squeaking against the hardwood floor. "Mr. Stallone, with all due respect." "Respect?" Stallone interrupted. "Let's talk about respect. You want to know what I learned about respect?" He gestured toward Benjamin, who was now showing his mother how well he could pronounce bruschetta. "I learned that respect isn't about how well you can speak or how you look. It's about the courage to face a world that sometimes doesn't want to make room for you, and to do it with a smile." From the kitchen, Chef Lucas Green emerged with a plate of freshly made garlic bread, placing it deliberately on Benjamin's table. "A gift from the kitchen," he announced, loud enough for everyone to hear, "for our honored guest." The simple act of service stood in stark contrast to Turner's behavior. Benjamin's face lit up. "Thank you," he exclaimed, his genuine gratitude making Turner's sophisticated pretense seem hollow in comparison. "Mum, look, it's just like in the pictures." Olivia Mitchell dabbed at her eyes with her napkin, overwhelmed by the kindness being shown to her son. Emma Anderson from the next table reached over and squeezed her hand in solidarity, while her husband James Anderson nodded approvingly at the chef's gesture. Turner, however, wasn't finished. "This isn't about kindness," he protested, his voice taking on an edge of desperation. "It's about maintaining standards. Our clientele expects..." "Your clientele expects basic human decency," came a new voice. Charlotte Young, the hostess, had finally found her courage. "In the 3 years I've worked here, I've seated CEOs, celebrities, and diplomats. None of them ever made me as proud to work here as Benjamin has in the past 15 minutes. Benjamin looked up at the sound of his name, offering Charlotte a warm smile that made her eyes glisten. "Would you like some garlic bread?" he asked, demonstrating the impeccable manners his sister Isabella had helped him practice. The simple offer of sharing food, this basic act of human connection, seemed to highlight everything that Turner had forgotten about the true meaning of hospitality. Several diners were now openly wiping tears from their eyes, moved by the contrast between Benjamin's natural grace and Turner's artificial sophistication. "You don't understand," Turner persisted, his voice rising slightly. "Fine dining has protocols, expectations." "Oh, we understand protocols," Stallone cut in, his voice carrying the quiet intensity that had made him famous. "But you know what else we understand? We understand that any protocol that denies basics, dignity to another human being, isn't worth the paper it's printed on." The restaurant's owner, Giuseppe James Carter, stepped forward. "Mr. Turner, in 1955, my father served people who others said didn't belong. He served them with dignity when other establishments turned them away. That's our protocol." Benjamin, still focused on his menu, had reached the dessert section again. "Cannoli," he pronounced perfectly, having practiced it for weeks after seeing it in an Italian movie. His innocent dedication to getting the words right made Turner's prejudice seem even more absurd. Noah Turner, the sous chef, emerged from the kitchen carrying a sample of the day's special. Without a word, he placed it in front of Benjamin, a silent act of rebellion against his namesake waiter's behavior. The message was clear: the kitchen staff had chosen their side. "This is unacceptable," William Turner declared, his professional mask cracking further. "You're all letting emotion cloud your judgment. A fine dining establishment has to maintain certain standards." Standards? Stallone stepped closer, his voice dropping to that familiar, intense whisper. "Let me tell you about standards. When I was starting out, people said I didn't meet their standards, said I didn't talk right, didn't look right. But you know what I learned? The only standard that matters is how you treat people." Benjamin, having finished his careful study of the menu, looked up at Turner with innocent curiosity. "Do you know what benvenuti means?" he asked, proud of the Italian welcome word he'd learned. "It means welcome. My sister Isabella taught me that." The simple question, asked without malice or judgment, seemed to hang in the air like a spotlight on Turner's. Prejudice. Here was a boy who had learned Italian words to make others feel welcome, while Turner used his knowledge of fine dining to make others feel excluded. Alexander Roberts, the maitre d', cleared his throat. "Mr. Turner, perhaps it's time for you to—" "No," Turner interrupted, his composure fully cracking now. "You don't understand what this will do to our reputation. People come here for a certain experience, a certain level of refinement." "Refinement?" Stallone's voice carried a dangerous edge. "You want to talk about refinement? This young man spent 2 years dreaming about eating here. He learned Italian words, practiced his manners, wore his best tie. Tell me, in all your years of refined service, have you ever shown that kind of dedication to making someone else's experience special?" The question hit Turner like a physical blow. Around the restaurant, diners nodded in agreement. William Hall, the veteran server, stepped forward with a fresh basket of bread, placing it on Benjamin's table with a warm smile that spoke volumes. About true hospitality, Benjamin, still unaware of the drama surrounding him, carefully folded his napkin on his lap, another skill his sister had helped him perfect. The simple act, performed with such earnest attention to detail, served as a powerful rebuke to Turner's assumptions about who did or didn't belong in fine dining. "But he's disrupting the atmosphere," Turner protested weakly, gesturing at nothing. "In particular, the other diners. The only person disrupting anything here is you," Michael Phillips called from the bar. Several other diners murmured in agreement, the collective disapproval making Turner's starched collar seem to shrink around his neck. The evening had transformed into something none of the diners had expected, a moment of collective standing up against discrimination, led by an unlikely alliance of a Hollywood legend and a teenage boy who simply wanted to celebrate his birthday in his dream restaurant. As the confrontation reached its peak, it became clear that this wasn't just about one dinner at one restaurant. It was about the countless times people had been made to feel they didn't belong, and about the importance of standing up against such prejudice, whether you're a famous actor or a young boy learning to pronounce carbonara. The story of what happened next would be shared thousands of times across social media, but those who were there would say that no post could capture the raw emotion of that moment, when sophistication and simplicity collided, and true class revealed itself in the most unexpected ways. What happened next would become the stuff of social media legend. Though no one in Giuseppe's that evening was thinking about viral moments or shared posts, they were too caught up in watching justice unfold in real time, served not with silver spoons, but with golden hearts. Stallone removed his chef's apron, revealing an elegant, casual outfit that somehow made Turner's formal attire look like a costume. "In comparison, you know," he began, his voice carrying that quiet intensity that had captivated movie audiences for decades. "I've been in the kitchen for the past hour, discussing investing in this restaurant." Turner's face, already pale, turned almost ghostly. The implications of his behavior began to dawn on him as Stallone continued. "I was interested in Giuseppe's because of its reputation for treating everyone like family. Seems like not everyone got that memo. Benjamin, still happily oblivious to the tension, showed Stallone his carefully practiced Italian phrases written on note cards. Look, my sister Isabella Mitchell helped me write these. This one says, "Thank you for the wonderful meal," in Italian. Stallone took the card, reading it with genuine interest. "Perfect pronunciation, kid," he said warmly, before turning back to Turner. "You hear that? He learned Italian just to say thank you. That's class you can't buy with all the fancy wines in your cellar." Charlotte Young stepped forward, her reservation book clutched to her chest. "Mr. Turner," she said, her voice steady. Despite her nervousness, "Do you remember last month when the food critic from the LA Times came in? The one you were so nervous about impressing?" Turner nodded stiffly, uncertain where this was going. "Well," Charlotte continued, gaining confidence, "he wrote in his review that Giuseppe's greatest strength was its ability to make every guest feel like they were part of an Italian family, regardless of their background. He said it was rare to find such authentic hospitality in a high-end restaurant." From his corner table, James Anderson stood up, his anniversary dinner momentarily forgotten. "I've been coming here for 20 years, he announced, "and I can tell you that the only person damaging the atmosphere of this restaurant is you, Mr. Turner." Emma Anderson joined her husband, adding, "We've celebrated every anniversary here because of how special this place makes everyone feel. Until tonight, we've never seen anyone treated as less than family." Giuseppe James Carter moved to stand beside Stallone. "Mr. Turner, do you know why my father opened this restaurant?" He didn't wait for an answer. He opened it because in 1955, as an Italian immigrant who barely spoke English, he was turned away from too many fine establishments. He promised himself that if he ever had his own restaurant, everyone would be welcome. Benjamin, hearing the word Italian, looked up excitedly. "Just like in my history book, Ellis Island. Did your papa come through Ellis Island?" His innocent question, asked with such genuine interest, made several diners smile through their tears. Chef Lucas Green emerged from the kitchen again, this time carrying a spectacular birthday dessert. "This," he announced loudly, "is our special tiramisu, prepared for our honored guest, Benjamin Mitchell." The dessert was decorated with chocolate writing that spelled out "Benvenuto," welcome. Turner watched as the restaurant he had tried to protect united against his prejudice. The sous chef, Noah Turner, no relation but sharing his surname, placed a hand on Benjamin's shoulder. "In all my years in fine dining," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I've never seen anyone approach a meal with more respect and enthusiasm than this young man." Sophia Clark, the artist who had been sketching the scene, held up her napkin. On it, she had captured Benjamin's joy as he read the menu, a stark contrast to Turner's sneer. "This is what fine dining looks like," she said simply, showing the sketch to nearby diners who nodded in appreciation. Then came the moment that would be recalled in every retelling of this story. Benjamin, looking at his beautiful birthday dessert, recalled another Italian phrase he had practiced. "La vita è bella," he said clearly. "Life is beautiful." The phrase hung in the air like a judgment. Turner's sophisticated veneer crumbled completely as he realized that this boy, whom he had deemed unworthy of fine dining, had just demonstrated a deeper understanding of Italian culture and hospitality than he had in 15 years of service. Stallone placed a hand on Benjamin's shoulder. "You know what, kid? You just summed up everything this restaurant should stand for. La vita è bella. Life is beautiful, especially when we share it with others." Michael Phillips closed his laptop completely and stood up from the bar. "Mr. Turner," he said, his voice carrying across the now silent restaurant, "I'm on the board of directors for 5 major hospitality groups in Los Angeles. I can assure you that your interpretation of standards is not only outdated, but legally questionable." William Hall, the veteran server, stepped forward with a fresh basket of bread. "In 30 years of service," he said, placing the basket on Benjamin's table, "I've learned that true class isn't about knowing which fork to use. It's about making people feel welcome." Olivia Mitchell, who had remained strong throughout the confrontation, finally allowed her tears to fall freely. "For 2 years," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "my son has pressed his face against the library window across the street, watching this restaurant. He memorized your menu. He practiced his manners. He saved his allowance to contribute to this dinner." Charlotte Young added, "And in the 15 minutes he's been here, he's shown more genuine appreciation for fine dining than most of our regular customers do in a year." Turner's bow tie seemed to deflate along with his arrogance. The restaurant's atmospheric lighting, designed to create an elegant ambiance, now seemed to spotlight his prejudice for all to see. Alexander Roberts, the maitre d', stepped forward with quiet authority. "Mr. Turner, I believe it's time for you to clock out. Permanently." The simple statement carried the weight of both professional judgment and moral conviction. Benjamin, still focused on his dessert, asked innocently, "Would anyone like to share? Mama says it's polite to share." The offer, made to the very people who had witnessed Turner's attempt to exclude him, demonstrated exactly what true hospitality should be. Stallone turned to Giuseppe. "You know what? I've made my decision about investing in Giuseppe's. This place represents everything I believe in. Standing up for what's right, treating everyone with dignity, and never letting anyone tell you that you don't belong." The other diners burst into spontaneous applause, not just for Stallone's announcement, but for the triumph of human dignity over prejudice. The sound filled the restaurant, bouncing off the burgundy walls and crystal chandeliers, transforming the elegant space into a celebration of inclusivity. Turner stood alone now, his starched uniform a symbol of the artificial barriers he had tried to maintain. Around him, the restaurant had united, servers, chefs, diners, and even a Hollywood legend, all brought together by a teenage boy whose only crime was wanting to celebrate his birthday in his dream restaurant. The story could have ended there, with Turner's humiliation and dismissal. But what happened next would prove that sometimes the greatest victories come not from defeating an enemy, but from transforming them. Because in that moment, as Benjamin offered to share his birthday dessert with everyone, including Turner, he demonstrated the true meaning of class and sophistication. In the end, it wasn't the presence of a Hollywood legend that transformed Giuseppe's that evening. It was the simple dignity of a boy who refused to let anything dim his joy. As William Turner stood frozen in his humiliation, Benjamin Mitchell did something extraordinary in its simplicity. He pulled out a chair and invited Turner to sit down. "Would you like to learn the Italian words too?" Benjamin asked, holding out his carefully prepared flashcards. "My sister Isabella says sharing makes everything better." The genuine offer of friendship in the face of prejudice brought fresh tears to the eyes of everyone present. Turner looked at the offered flashcards, his hands trembling slightly. For the first time that evening, perhaps for the first time in his career, he saw past his own prejudices to recognize the true meaning of hospitality. I don't deserve your kindness," he managed to say. Stallone, who had witnessed countless dramatic scenes throughout his career, later said that none had moved him quite like this one. "You know what, kid?" he said to Benjamin. "You just taught everyone here the most important lesson about class. It's not about who you keep out, it's about who you welcome in." Olivia Mitchell watched her son with quiet pride as he began teaching Turner the proper pronunciation of gratitudine. Gratitude. The irony was lost on Benjamin, but not on anyone else in the restaurant. Here was the boy whom Turner had deemed unsuitable for fine dining, teaching the waiter about both Italian language and human dignity. Charlotte Young approached the table with a fresh set of menus. "Would you like to start over?" she asked, her question carrying weight beyond just the dinner service. Turner nodded slowly, removing his bow tie as if shedding the weight of his previous attitude. Around the restaurant, other diners began sharing their own stories. Emma Anderson spoke about her brother with Down syndrome, who had become a successful artist. Michael Phillips revealed that his daughter was on the autism spectrum and had recently graduated from college. James Anderson talked about his father, an immigrant who had faced similar prejudices decades ago. Giuseppe James Carter brought out a bottle of his finest wine, reserved for special occasions. "In my father's village in Italy," he said, as he poured a small amount for Olivia and filled Benjamin's glass with sparkling cider. "They say that a meal shared with enemies becomes a feast among friends." Chef Lucas Green emerged from the kitchen with a new creation, a pasta dish he named on the spot Pasta alla Benjamin, featuring all of Benjamin's favorite ingredients that he had enthusiastically pointed out in the menu. "This," the chef announced, "will be a permanent addition to our menu." Sophia Clark, the artist, presented Benjamin with her napkin sketch, now complete with the entire scene, including the moment of reconciliation. "To remind us," she said, "that true class is about how we recover from our mistakes, not how we judge others for theirs." William Hall, who had witnessed 3 decades of dinners at Giuseppe's, later said that he had never seen the restaurant's true spirit more perfectly embodied than in that moment of forgiveness and transformation. "This," he said, gesturing to Benjamin teaching Turner Italian phrases, "this is what breaking bread together is all about." The other staff members, led by Noah Turner and Alexander Roberts, gathered around the table as Benjamin excitedly shared his knowledge of Italian culture. Facts he had learned during his 2 years of preparation for this dinner. Their presence transformed from a service team into a supportive community. Stallone, watching the scene unfold, made an unexpected announcement. "In honor of this evening," he declared, "my investment in Giuseppe's will come with one condition. We're going to start a program for kids with special needs to learn about fine dining and hospitality. And," he added with a meaningful look at Turner, "about acceptance." Turner, who had begun the evening as an antagonist, found himself transformed by Benjamin's simple act of kindness. "I've spent 15 years learning about fine dining," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "but I never understood what it truly meant until tonight." Benjamin, still focused on sharing his joy of Italian culture, pulled out more flashcards. "This one," he said, pointing to a carefully written phrase, "means everyone is welcome in Italian." The phrase, "Tutti sono benvenuti," seemed to echo the evening's lesson. The story of that evening at Giuseppe's spread far beyond the restaurant's elegant walls. Social media posts and news coverage focused not on the celebrity involvement, but on the moment when prejudice was overcome, not through confrontation, but through simple human kindness. Olivia Mitchell received hundreds of messages from parents of children with special needs, thanking her and Benjamin for standing their ground with dignity. But perhaps more importantly, she received a handwritten note from William Turner, apologizing for his behavior and asking to volunteer for Stallone's new program. 1 month later, Giuseppe's hosted its first Tutti sono benvenuti night, where children with special needs and their families were invited to learn about fine dining in a supportive environment. William Turner, no longer a waiter but now a student of true hospitality, helped Benjamin teach basic Italian phrases to the guests. The restaurant's reputation soared, not because of its celebrity investor or its exquisite cuisine, but because it had demonstrated that true class has nothing to do with how you hold your fork and everything to do with how you hold your heart open to others. Benjamin's birthday dinner became a yearly tradition at Giuseppe's, with an open invitation to anyone who had ever been made to feel they didn't belong. The menu always featured pasta alla Benjamin, and the evening always ended with everyone learning to say, "La vita è bella." Charlotte Young, who had found her voice that evening, was promoted to training manager, responsible for teaching new staff members about the true meaning of hospitality. Her first lesson always included the story of Benjamin Mitchell and the night that changed everything. Sophia Clark's napkin sketch was framed and hung in the restaurant's entrance, alongside a plaque that read, "Tutti sono benvenuti," a reminder to everyone who entered that true sophistication is measured by how we treat others, not by how well we can pronounce the menu items. The evening's events had lasting ripples throughout the Los Angeles restaurant scene. Other establishments began implementing similar inclusive programs, recognizing that diversity enriches rather than diminishes the fine dining experience. As for William Turner, his journey from prejudice to understanding became part of his own mission. He now speaks at hospitality schools about the night he learned that real service isn't about maintaining standards of exclusion, but about creating spaces of inclusion. Giuseppe's became known not just as a fine dining establishment, but as a place where the true spirit of hospitality lived in every interaction. The restaurant's success proved that excellence and inclusivity aren't mutually exclusive, they're mutually enriching. Benjamin's simple joy in learning Italian and sharing his knowledge transformed not just one evening, but an entire community's understanding of what it means to welcome others. His flashcards, lovingly created with his sister Isabella's help, became a symbol of how preparation and passion trump prejudice every time. The story ends not with the triumph of one group over another, but with the recognition that we all have something to learn from each other. As Benjamin would say, with the pure wisdom that children often possess, "La vita è bella." Life is beautiful, especially when we share it. So the next time you're in Los Angeles, stop by Giuseppe's. Order the pasta alla Benjamin, learn a few Italian phrases, and remember that sometimes the greatest lessons in sophistication come from those whom society too often underestimates. And if you're watching this video, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that everyone deserves a seat at the table. Because in the end, it's not about the food we serve. It's about the hearts we touch and the barriers we break, one dinner at a time. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and let us know in the comments what act of kindness has changed your perspective on life. Remember, as Benjamin taught us all, tutti sono benvenuti, everyone is welcome.